Hi, I'm David Hamburger for Acoustic Guitar, and in this lesson, I'm going to show you how to add walking bass lines to a steady bass blues in E. So the first thing we need to do is have a steady bass going on the low E string. So in example 1, you can see we've got just the bass line playing on all 4 beats like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm just playing the low E string. I've got a little palm muting going on, resting this part of my hand right where the strings meet the bridge. And you can slide your hand around a little bit to find the right spot. You move it up too much and you'll lose all the sound. You move it all the way back and the note will just ring out. You want a little bit of thump, and that's just so the bass sounds different from the notes you're playing on the high string. So the melody kind of pops out in front of the bass. So here's the bass in example 1. Now the cool thing is you don't have to change anything over here when you start to add in your first bass line. So going up the low string in example 2, we've got these notes: the open E, 2nd fret, 3rd fret, and 4th fret. So you're still just picking on beats 1, 2, 3, and 4, but now you're playing the root, the 2nd, the flat 3rd, and the 3rd of E. So that's example 2. I'll play it a little slower. 2, 3, 4. Okay, now next we want to put a lick on top. So in example 3, we've got this simple lick on the top string with just 2 notes. So we're playing the flat 3rd and then going to the root of E. And the timing is we're playing on 1 and on the and of 1. And that's going to be really important when we start to put everything together. But right now, here's what example 3 sounds like. 2, 3, and 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and. If you slow that way down and make sure that you really count all the ands, all the 8th notes, 2, and 3, and 4, and. And we're playing swing 8th notes. So the first of those 2 notes lasts a little longer. The second one is a little shorter. So 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and like that. So then we want to start putting this together with the bass. Now before we go and try to put the whole walking bass underneath our first lick, let's just get the first bass note for the downbeat. So in example 4, we've just got our lick on top and 1 bass note right on the downbeat. So we've got a pinch where you play 2 notes at once, one with the thumb and one with the finger, and then the note that comes afterwards on the and. So example 4 is like this. And if I count it in, 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and. Right? So we're just practicing getting that note, that first note, fretted note on top, open bass note, and then afterwards, the open string. I'm using my ring finger because my default when I play this kind of music is index on the 3rd string, middle finger on the 2nd string, and ring finger on the high string. I didn't invent that. That comes straight out of Ken Perlman's fantastic book, Fingerstyle Guitar. And if you've never checked that out, I recommend it. It's a great resource. That's one of the books I learned out of a lot when I was learning to play. Okay, well now we're going to try to put the bass line back in. So we're going to have this opening pinch on 1 and then walk up for the rest of the measure. That's example 5. And so you can see that if you can do exercise 4, example 4, then afterwards all you have to do is play bass notes on beats 2, beat 3, and beat 4. So if I count it in, it sounds like this. 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and. So it sounds tricky, but you're never doing really more than two things at once. And mostly you're doing one thing, right? So you have this pinch at the beginning. That's two things, right? Two notes, then just an open high string, and then just a bass note, just a bass note, just a bass note. Let's try adding in another lick. In example 6, we're going to play 3rd fret on the 2nd string and go to the high string. Same timing as our original lick, 1 and, right? So we're going to have 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. And if I count it in, 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Now we want to put this lick through the same paces. So in example 7, we're going to pair this with the bass. And so we'll have a pinch on 1 and then go to the high string. So same idea, different lick. So we start off with a pinch, 3rd fret on the 2nd string, open low string, and then on the and, go to the high string. So 2 and 3 and 4 and. 1 and 2. That's coming. Got ahead of myself. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Now we're going to add the bass line in. So for example 8, we're going to do the pinch and then follow with the next 3 bass notes. So 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Now if we're going to play a blues and we're in E, we're going to want an A chord and a B chord. So let's start with the A chord, because all we have to do for A is bring the thumb over to the 5th string, and then we have our A bass line. Right? So that's example 9, just the A bass, and I'll count it in. 2 and 3 and 4 and. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So I'm just climbing up the A string on every beat of the bass with the thumb. I've got a note, open A, B, C, C sharp, root, 2nd, flat 3rd, and 3rd of A. So if we take our first lick, that's actually going to work great over an A7 chord. So we can do the pinch on beat 1, play the open high string on the and then walk up on beats 2, 3, and 4. So that is example 10. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. And if I slow it way down, 2 and 3 and 4 and. All right, so A and E, they have an open string we can start the bass line on. Not so much with B, right? But if you know how to play an open B7 chord, here with the root, the 3rd, the flat 7, the root, and the 5th, that shape is kind of your starting point, even though we don't need the whole chord. We're going to start our bass here, and then walk up. We're going to do the same steps up from the bass, but it's going to look a little different because we're going to cross over onto the 4th string. So you can think of the notes being like this, right? So that's the root, second, flat third, and third of B. Again, from our opening note, just like with A and with E, we're going up a whole fret or 2 steps and then half step or 1 fret, another half step. But again, we're going to cross over onto the D string. So we're going to have these notes, and then we're going to go over to the open D string and then get the D sharp here at the first fret of the 4th string. So that's example 11. 2, 3, 4. Now, if you're wondering why we're sliding up instead of using this finger, that's because eventually we're going to have to coordinate this with some licks on top. And it's going to work out better not to tie up the pinky. So we're going to slide out of position up here using the middle finger for the 4th fret before coming back in like this. And you'll see why in just a second. The lick that we're going to play over the B7 chord has the same rhythm as the other licks we've been playing. We're going to go outside of the E minor pentatonic scale for the first note. We're going to play this F sharp note at the 2nd fret of the high string. That's actually part of the B7 chord. It's the 5th in a B7 chord. And we're going to play it like this on one and. Play the high string at the 2nd fret and then go to the open 2nd string. So if I count it in, it sounds like this. 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So you want to make sure that chord is, your fingers are nice and vertical, nice and perpendicular to the fretboard, that you're not leaning over and muting that open B, so you can get a nice clean attack on it. And then, of course, we want to pair that with the bass note on the downbeat. So in example 13, we're going to do the pinch just like we did on E and on A. Just one bass note on the downbeat, and then pair that with a pinch and on top. So that'll sound like this. All right, so I'm pinching 5th fret with I'm playing the 5th fret with my thumb, 5th fret, playing the 5th string with my thumb, and I got the high string on top. That's a pinch, and on the and, come in with the middle finger on the open B string. Count it in, it sounds like this. 2 and 3 and 4 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. And of course, now we're going to pair it with the entire bass line. So we'll do the pinch on beats 1 and then we're going to move up with the 2nd finger of the fretting hand, go to the 4th fret, open D string, and 1st fret on the D string. That's example 14. It sounds like this. 2 and 3 and 4 and. Now this next part is definitely some extra credit, but if you can play vertical enough with your fingers, perpendicular to the fretboard, not kind of leaning over, and that's, this is what we all do, right? But for this particular move, if you can keep this finger free of the 2nd string, then when you go to move up, you can keep that open B ringing out, which will help to kind of tie the whole lick together. If the note disappears, then you just have the bass. That's cool, but if you can, work towards this soon or eventually. And keep that open B going, then great. Don't stress about it if it's not happening. It still sounds good. even if the B is not ringing out. And probably one of the best ways to get to where it's ringing out is just to get comfortable with the move in the first place without focusing on that open B. And as you get the whole thing more coordinated, you'll start to have the bandwidth to worry about whether the B is ringing out or not. All right, now we get to put all this together into a 12-bar blues. So I'm going to play through the whole thing at tempo. I'll play through it again slowly. And then, as you'll see, there's some stuff we haven't really covered yet in the last couple bars when we get to the turnaround. And I'll come back after I've played the slow version and I'll talk a little bit about that and what's going on there. So here's Walk Me Baby played up to tempo. 1, 2, 3, 4. Here it is played slowly. 1, 2, 3, 4. So let's zoom in for a minute on that turnaround, bars 3 and 4 in the third line of the notation and tab. So there's a thing I like to do when things get tricky with fingerstyle that I call the horizontal 3-step. And the reason I call it that is because there are 3 steps, and the whole idea is to pull back from looking at all the grippy stuff that we need to do to play fingerstyle and make sure that we're thinking about what we're doing as a bass line, which moves in a horizontal way, and a melody, which moves in a horizontal way. Horizontal as opposed to vertical. Like vertical is like, we got all these notes stacked up to play this chord. Horizontal, more like a melody or a bass line. Something linear that unfolds over time. It's really easy to get into the weeds with fingerstyle and just move from grip to grip and just be sort of having a bunch of tablature numbers swimming around in our heads. But if you can pull back for a minute and isolate the bass line and then isolate the melody, then put it all back together, you can put it back together having a much more musical sense of what it is you're trying to do. So usually a bass line is played by a bass player or maybe the left hand of a pianist, and the melody is something that someone sings or plays on the guitar, the harmonica, or whatever. We're trying to do 2 things at once, right? We're trying to be the melody and the bass. Before we try to put all that together, we should really understand what the bass is trying to do and what the melody is trying to do. So the first thing is to step back and look at the bass. That's step 1 of this horizontal 3-step. So just follow the tab or the notation, and look at what the bass is doing. It's still steady bass. The thumb is just playing on beats 1, 2, 3, and 4. But now we've got these notes going up to the 4th fret on the low string, then open A, 1st fret on the A string, and then 2nd fret, open, 4th fret, 2nd fret, open. This bass line is actually spelling out a chord progression. This is the root of E, this is the 3rd of E in the bass, this is the root of A, this is the root of A sharp diminished, very fancy, and then this is the root of B, and then we're walking down a scale just to get to E again. So that's the function of the bass line, and the way you deliver it is to know these notes and then play your steady bass, thinking 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. And that count is important because the bass is sort of your foundation. Well, it's your foundation. And if you know that you're playing on the strong beats, 1, 2, 3, and 4, when you learn the melody, like we're about to do, you're setting yourself up to be able to combine the melody and the bass by knowing that some melody notes are going to be with the bass on the strong beats, and some melody notes are going to be in between. So let's take a look at the melody now. We've got now with the melody, it's really important to listen for the phrasing, meaning where does each little bit of the melody start and stop? Because it's not just notes and it's not just numbers, it's phrases, it's little pieces of melody that are grouped together to make a bigger melody. So in this case, in the first part of the turnaround, that's one phrase. And then in the next measure, in measure 4 of the 3rd line, we have 2 shorter phrases. We have this one, and then this one to end it. And so in the first part of the lick, 1, 2, and 3, and we can sit and count it out 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and we can look at where those notes fall over the bass, because some of them are lined up with the bass and some fall in between. And then when we get to the next part of the melody, we've got 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So when we have the melody on its own, we can practice playing that like this, 2 and 3 and 4 and. And if you can hear it as 3 phrases of these little breaths in between, it starts to feel more melodic, more like something you would sing, and more fluid and more musical. So now, that was step 2, isolating the melody. Step 1 was isolating the bass. Step 3, now we're going to put it all together, and we're going to basically line everything up and see where do we pinch, that's on the strong beats, and where do we play in between, that's on the ands. And so we just start from the beginning of the 3rd measure of the last line and look at where the pinches are. We start with a pinch, and then another pinch, and then open B string on the and then another pinch on beat 3 to the and then the bass on its own on beat 4. So 1, 2, and 3, and 4. And then same thing when we get to the next measure. 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and 1. So if I count that in, 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and. So it feels like a lot, but the most you're doing at any one time is a pinch. You're only ever playing 2 notes at a time at the most. And a lot of times over here, you've got an open string to work with, sometimes 2 open strings. So we start out with exactly that, like open high string, open low string, then 1 fretted note on the bottom and an open note on top, and another open string, and then a fretted note on the 2nd string and an open 5th string to an open high string to a fretted bass note. So look at all those open notes. And now here we've got an open and a fretted note, same thing, fretted on top, going to an open string, fretted bass note, 2 fretted notes, the only time that happens in this turnaround, open high string, and we're back. So that's how to take apart a trickier passage, isolate the bass, see what that's doing, what kind of horizontal thing is happening there, isolate the melody, see how that's unfolding over time, and then go back and line it all up. 2, 3, 4. Time really slowly. 2 and 3, 4 and like that. So that's my lesson on how to add walking bass lines to your steady bass blues in E. Remember to take your time going through the steps, make sure you can play each bass line, play each melody, and that you can line each one up with each other, and that you're keeping track of where the count is so that you can get everything placed just right and make it really groove. Above all, just have fun working on this. It's a really great sound to be able to add in to your blues playing, and with just a little bit of work, you can start to get these lines under your fingers and into your playing. If you want to learn more about me and other lessons that I've done, you can look me up at fretboardconfidential.com. And for acoustic guitar, I'm David Hamburger.